Bueno, buenas noches a todos y todas. Muchas gracias por venir. Una nueva actividad pública del CEAC. Hoy recibimos al arquitecto italiano con práctica en París, Umberto Napolitano. La verdad que es un placer contar con la presencia de Umberto en los talleres esta semana y con el apoyo de la Embajada de Francia y del Instituto Francés en la Argentina para esta actividad, que es la última que hacemos en colaboración este año. Ya van más de 8 actividades públicas que llevamos entre seminarios, talleres y programas de conferencias junto a ellos. Estamos muy agradecidos por su apoyo, por el equipo local de Lucía y Naer. Como siempre, todas las actividades públicas de la escuela, este programa de conferencias está disponible en YouTube, donde pueden ver algunas actividades anteriores. Y antes de contarles un poco de esta noche y pasar a inglés, me gustaría ponerlos al tanto de las próximas semanas de la escuela. A ver. Un segundo. Por un lado, la semana próxima en el CEAC vamos a recibir al arquitecto japonés Hasegawa, que va a dar la última conferencia magistral del año. Esto será el jueves 23 de noviembre, jueves próximo a las 19 horas. Marcelo Fayden, decano de la escuela, está presentando su trabajo. Y el otro lunes, el lunes 27, vamos a presentar el primer monográfico de la colección de Tella y de la arquitectura, resultado del Premios de la Arquitectura Prácticas Emergentes 2023, cuya convocatoria lanzamos a inicios de este año. Fue un premio, una convocatoria dirigida a estudios de Argentina y países limítrofes cuyos miembros fueron menores de 40 años. El ganador de este premio fue el estudio de Río de Janeiro, un grupo de arquitectos, compuesto por Caio Calafate y Pedro Varela. Recibimos más de 50 propuestas de participantes, por lo cual estamos muy contentos buenas noches, de poder compartir el trabajo de Grúa en 2 semanas. Ellos estarán aquí para brindar una conferencia y se presentará el monográfico, que es el resultado de este premio, y que va a servir también como punto de lanzamiento para la editorial de la arquitectura que empezamos este año bajo la dirección de Juan Cantallón. Bueno, ahora sí me gustaría cederle la palabra a Jeronimo Bailat, profesor de la escuela, director de las oficinas BigMat y de Clerc, para presentarlo a Umberto y mencionar un poco el marco de estas actividades. Umberto, thank you so much for coming. Y bueno, Jeronimo, adiós. Gracias, Javi.
Buenas noches. Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we are honored to have with us Umberto Napolitano, co-founder of Paris-based LAN architecture, as a part of a series of lectures entitled New Realisms, organized by the CEAC with the aim of bringing architecture and life closer together, rediscovering the field of action and the responsibility of the discipline through different perspectives of radical practice of architecture that allow us to discover new ways of appropriating and transforming reality through it. Umberto was born in Naples and graduated at the École Nationale Supérieure d'Architecture de Paris, Bailat, in 2001. Along with his partner Benoit Jallon, he founded LAN in 2002. Umberto was also a professor at the Columbia University of New York, at the AA School of Architecture in London, and at the TU in Vienna. Understanding the form as a starting point of transformation, LAN plays with different rules marked by the identity of the context, using history as a lens to approach the project. I believe that, as the philosopher Carsten Harris states, LAN's architecture helps to replace a meaningless reality with a theatrically, or better yet, architecturally transformed reality. A reality that traps us, and when we surrender to it, offers us the illusion of meaning. In the last 2 decades, they have managed to consolidate their unique voice in the European architectural landscape with diverse projects in terms of building typology, ranging from offices and houses to more exotic ones like a prison, a theater, and a fire station. Within the iconic operations that the office has produced, we can mention the extension of the Maxi Museum in Rome, the Benoit Theater, the Uravenir Tower, the experimental housing in Bègue, the student residence on Rue Pachol in Paris, the EDF Archive Center, and the Neue Hamburger Terrassen. However, LAN's practice doesn't end here. In addition to architectural and urban design, the office is actively involved in the disciplinary debate and has developed a significant theoretical production with a strong architectural research, as we can see on their successful first Paris Haussmann publication in 2017, together with an exhibition at the Pavillon de l'Arsenal in Paris, or their more recent publication, Napoli Super Modern. Also, I have recently had the great opportunity to visit their beautiful office at Pompidou for the presentation of their last monograph published this year by Tessa Quadernos, and I have to confess that the warm atmosphere that was present on that terrace was absolutely inspiring. Since 2019, and with a strong relation with the series we are presenting tonight, they have also run the RAAR Research Laboratory dedicated to architecture and reality, with the aim of dealing with the way reality acts on architecture and architecture acts on reality by questioning themselves: what is the future of the city? What are the spaces of tomorrow? What tools do we need to design for the present? With this in mind, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Umberto Napolitano.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think you realize that you start to become old when your presentation is more than 2 minutes. No? There's too many things. Thank you for this invitation. It's a pleasure to be in Buenos Aires. Tonight I will. The title of the lecture will be Limit of Form, Format and Limit. You already presented the office. I will just go through that. That's our space, the one that you were in. LAN means Local Architecture Network. And it's a space of project theory and practice, project and research that aims to challenge the idea that architecture doesn't end in a very specific place, the disciplinary one, but it needs to be fed by everything you can find around you just to understand the reality. We founded the office in 2002. We were lucky enough to build more than 100 projects, extremely different in terms of typology, type of client, sites. This is a diagram of the ongoing project, which are from 50 meters square to more than 100,000 meters square. So the range and the approach is very different. The office claims to be European. I'm Italian, Benoit is French, and we really take care of the idea of having people that come from all around Europe. I don't know if you feel that, but Europe is a space to be constructed and built. So it's a reality that exists for the moment only in the morning. But as a cultural space, probably from here you feel differently, but as a cultural space, everything has to be done. So we decided since the beginning to place ourselves in this context. So the studio is French, but without being totally French, it claims itself as a European space. I start all my lecture with this few lines from Aldo Rossi. It's a book that if you haven't read, you should. It's called The Architecture of the City. I cannot read, but I know by heart. And then there is these 3 things that really changed my vision on the city and probably represent the base of what we try to do with the office. It's by architecture of the city. We mean 2 different things. First, the city is seen as a gigantic man-made object, a work of engineering and architecture that large and complex and growing over time. And second, certainly more limited but still crucial aspect of the city, namely urban fact, which, like the city itself, are characterized by their own history and thus by their own form. what we mean, what Aldo Rossi means for that is that the city is an object, is a man-made object. It can be mentioned. He has to be scientifically approached. As an architect, you should understand the city, the form of the city, the weight of the city, the materials of the city, the structure of the city. Everything concerns this object that could be analyzed. So we should give ourselves the knowledge and the tools to enter in this dialogue with the cities. And then the city is a cultural space that then become identitarian. I said the same thing yesterday in the presentation of the book, but I found every time amazing the fact that if I ask you where you come from, you say from Buenos Aires, and Buenos Aires is a bunch of stone and concrete. So there is this link between what we are and the place we live, so between the object and ourselves as a citizen, as a human being, and as a collectivity, which is extremely intriguing. So as an architect, we should, in a certain sense, understand this cultural space and also have the knowledge of the very scientific part of our work, which is the understanding of the urban form. So it's what we do in LAN, and to do that, we have done that since the beginning, the idea of nourish ourselves through collaboration, through investigation, through try to understand the present, what means to be contemporary, what means to live now, what we can add to the construction of our own world, and in the same time practice that through a project. And lately, like 3 years ago, we founded the research lab, which is called RAD, which is in between academia and practice, with PhD that comes from different schools. And through that we do a very project which are really in between these two fields. One of them was Haussmann, which helped us to develop a method of research based on one of the things that we really should know, which is drawing. So we start to draw everything, classify, mention, compare, and try to understand if the things that we see, the reality that we see, that come from history and past, can be modeled for and can help us to answer to questions that just expect us for the next time. This was the exhibition and the book. And as we said, we just ended this project, which became an exhibition in Switzerland, in the Switzerland Center of Architecture of Naples. So as an architect, the problem is that the discipline is too large. The approach of everything is too complex. Jean Nouvel said once, speaking with Baudrillard, which is a philosopher, the architect is the one that answers to questions that no one's asked for. So in a certain sense, it's real. We have to rise. Our job is not only to do the best construction for the best demands of clients. Our job is probably to show the unseen part of these needs and use each project to build the world that we want for tomorrow. So the point is, we should raise the question, we should compose our own agenda, and then try to find instruments to answer to these questions and methods. So we can say that in our office we have 2 words that come every time on the table, whatever is the project, and help us to understand the way into the project, to detach the project from the program, for the function, for the analysis, and try to understand in a most autonomous way the object in itself. The first one is form, and the second one is limit. So form, we use the definition of Paul Klee, which is very nice. This form must no account ever be considered as something to be go over with, as a result, as an end, but rather as a genesis, raw essence. Form as a semblance is an evil and dangerous spread. So form is not an end. Form is the beginning of something. So form, the word form is more, for us, is more close to formation than form in itself. So form is something that has to carry the potential to be a beginning of a history. It's a bit abstract, but I will show you two projects that really, for me, translate this idea of a form that is in movement, the form that can, in a certain sense, evolve to different conditions. One of these projects is one of our first projects. It's a social housing in Bailat. Bailat is the site is this red point. It's a city which is very close to Bordeaux, but is a city that was is a part of the city that was designed after the war, during the reconstruction in France, where in the same moment they were built in 14 years, 40 million housing. It's a crazy moment of France. It's following a program that was called ZUP, Zone d'Urbanisation Prioritaire, and gives us territory which were not really a success in terms of architecture. I don't know if you remember the riot of 2005, what's happening, all this. And Bailat was one of them. Those are the pictures of the district that were burned during that period, and then at a certain point became a very non-controlled territory that has to evolve. That was pictured from the time. And then a man came, it was the mayor of the city, Noël Mamère, which was also the president of the Greens in France at the beginning of this ecological movement. And he did two things. The first one was to connect the Bailat to Bordeaux through a new network of public transportation. And the second one was to destroy everything. We were not there at this precise moment. It was kind of very welcoming by the neighborhood, except by the people that lived in that space. But on this stone, they launched a competition and they asked to us, the master plan was won by a Dutch studio with a simple idea, which was the anti-modern city. So let's do a city where the building is a masses, is big enough to define the street, and where the limit between public and private, because that's the problem probably of the modern city that we see before, that you don't know what is yours, what is public, what is collective, what is private. And so the limit is the facade. So once you pass the facade of the building, the courtyard is collective, and then from the courtyard you go in your flat and it's private. So everything it's like whatever is the historical city in Europe is like that, the neighbors from Paris. The buildings are blocked, and the blocks are the limit between the public and the private. Then the building, by its own facade, design the street or define the street. So we were asked to design these three buildings we were asked. It was a competition, and we were very, very young. I was 28 years old for these three buildings. And 2008 came on the table, and that was the program at the beginning. Then the crisis, they asked for half of the program, which means that the entire master plan could not have these masses enough proportionate to the public space to function. But we had this gray space to be designed. We could build something there without having money and program. So we were very young, coming outside the school, and we decided to bet in one idea, which is let's do a single family house in a collective system. Let's find an hybrid form which can put together two programs and take the advantage of each of them. The advantage of a single family house, no neighborhood, exterior space. I enter from my garden, I can expand my house without permit, asking to nobody. And the advantage of the collective system, which is sharing resources, sharing costs, sharing structure, and create collective life. And we end up with a form, which is this, just a superposition of blocks, one void, one block, which means that you don't have a neighbor on the fourth side of your block, and you can use one of the void with your own housing. So the idea was that you buy 100 meters square, and then you have 200 with this void. And I don't know how, but we won't. And the building is crazy in itself because it's 60 meters large. With each flat has three orientations, so the street, the courtyard, and the garden. And so you have 4 times the amount of facade. So it's an extremely expensive diagram compared to the price that we had, which was a very low price for social housing. So it was a bet at the beginning. So those are diagrams. The idea was 2015 and then 2055, everyone's used this void as it was. And that's the result, which is where we designed exactly this idea, using a skeleton and then using the void and giving to them the facade to close everything or to open up in function of the weather condition. Obviously, the typology are very different, one from the other. And it was a big lesson because the entire building, it's just, we do not design any details, it's just an assemblage. Everything is bought on catalog. The idea was to find the most interesting industrial piece that we can use in a specific place and role. This is an addition of these that generate those kind of space. And those are pictures of the inhabitant at the beginning and now. This is literally 1 year ago, which less or more is still the same. So as you can also observe, this is the interior of the courtyard, this the common stairs, this illusion. So as you can understand here, the movement of the form is given by the void, which means that you can build, you can occupy. This project was exhibited during the Venice Biennale with Alejandro Aravena, and we show how each void was used by the different people, and there was a movie on that. And but that never happened every time, the fact that you have this potential through a space that you don't feel. So I will show you another movement, another forming movement, which is exactly the opposite. It's in Paris. It's in the last district, which is ongoing now. It's in the north of Paris. It's called Batignolles. And we were asked to design this triangle, which is exactly in the moment from, let's say, which play a role of transferring from the Osmanian city to this new district. In the brief, we received this image, which is really a generic ecological city that we are building now in Europe. There is a park, different towers. These towers are designed by different architects, and as an idea of city, you bet on the talent of each of them to create something at the end, but you cannot control the idea. And Paris is exactly the opposite of that. Paris is one building. We call the Osmanian building, the investment building, 27 meters high, an extrusion of the entire city on the same height with one material that comes from the underground, is a stone, and all the pieces of the facade bought on catalog. It was the beginning of the revolution. And with this, the transmission of the, you see the picture here, you don't have church, you don't have street, you don't have any sign, just the windows and a gallery, and you know that you are in Paris. So there is a level of identity that goes until the small scale where the windows, the galleries become part of a large urban project. And everything is related to what we call the Parisian building, the Osmanian building, and it was a project run by Napoleon and Aswan and then the engineers. Those are the buildings that were built between 1951 and 1940, in 60 years, 70% of the city. And when you overlap that with the street, you can say that Paris has been built in 60 years. Using one figure, I will pass that, which is the Osmanian building, which was the first investment building. It was a building that was built to be rented. So you didn't know the people who was addressed, and you have to be the most generic and flexible that you can. And in 2 centuries, those buildings have become incredibly useful because they are housing, office, museum, school, hotel, and they change over the time. So we decided to answer to the competition just studying that, saying, okay, the Parisian building is a building that can change over the time and has a level of flexibility, how we can translate that into contemporary architecture. So we start, that's in China. It's the copy of Paris, which is made copying an housing building. So is also the identity of the city itself is translated in a private project, which is an housing building. So we were very interested on this idea of creating the contemporary houseman building where you get far from the language, but you keep the essence and the intelligence of the figure. And so we tried to answer with a diagram, so left and right, China and Paris. And they have few things in common, those buildings. The first one is 50% of glass, 50% of stone. A grading facade that can help you to design whatever is the plan in the back. Second stage, they are at different volume, 4 meters, 5 meters in the ground floor, then first floor 2.8, then 4.5, 3, and then 3.2. Which means that it's the opposite of the modern architecture where all the floors are the same. If it is an housing, it's 2.8 or 3 meters. If it's an office, it's 3.5, 3.6. Here you can find different possibility of using different volumes. And then everything is made, it's very compact and is made on catalog. And then when we did the book and the exhibition, we found the catalog of all the facade and the piece. So it's extremely economic. The structure is very clear, so you can go over in the time with that. And the ground floor is connected to the first floor to double the surface. So when McDonald's arrives, they take the 2 floors. When there is a bakery, there is a student living on the first floor. And this is reversible. And so and it's all the surface, commercial surface in the entire city can double the surface and can go back. That's what makes alive Paris, and what makes the fact that you go now, you go in 10 years and you will find different configuration in every street. And that was already present in the section of the time. This richness of uses, of layering of social classes, etc. So we decided to answer with that in a new way. So we transferred to the facade. We give to the facade the grid of an office building, 1.35 meters. So everything is like convertible in an office building. You can put wall. The structure is in the facade. It's one windows that turns around. The ground floor is connected to the first floor, and then when we need a lodger, we just push back the same windows without any change in structure. That the windows go back in the facade at the end. We present in the competition the possibility of this open plan. So everything is totally free. Office and housing, and when we won the competition, we increased the possibility. So in the facade, you find electricity, ventilation, everything is in the first layer, which is a bit radical, but when you know how to relate to that potential. So if tomorrow you want to change your plan, you know that you open the facade and you will find what you need inside the facade. It included the solar control. So everything is prefabricated. It's a very nice polished concrete. It has been built like a Lego and gives back this, which by the block in itself, it became a corner building that you can easily put in the collection of the corner building, the Parisian corner building. So as you can see, the movement of the form here is given by the intelligence of the form in itself. And obviously, the height of the floor, it's in between housing and office, so it's different, and the minimum is 3.2 meters, where you can do an office without selling, and an housing which is very high. They've obviously deepened there, and even if it's very generic, finally it's very rich as a space, because even if it's not considered to be an housing, at the end it's a luxury housing. And so that's a bit the idea. The idea of in this movement of form is that the form is the beginning of a new history, and you design for today, but you open up a scenario for tomorrow. I think that I really heritage that from my origin. Those are typical, let's call that sculpture or cadaver ski that you find in the south of Italy. And the nice story of that is that when you build a house, you leave the steel going up with the possibility of add another columns and another layer. So the father builds the ground floor, and normally the son will build the first floor. What I like is the fact that you have to overcharge your pillars, you have to overcharge the structure, with the idea of of the potential that you generate for another generation. That's for me the most important act in architecture. Is this idea that you let open the system, you give to the system a certain intelligence that then you can write new history on the top. How do you choose a form? I like this definition of Matisse because the point is, okay, we understand that the form has to be in movement, but which is the right form? How do you select the form? How do you generate the form? The Smithsons say that the architects are forms givers, in the sense that they give form to ideas, but at the same time they give form to others. And this form has to be read, understood, and shared. The form is a common ground of the first step of the construction of something that we call at the end patrimonio, that we share, all of us. I like Matisse when he says, we want something else. We work towards serenity through simplification of idea and form. The ensemble is our only idea. Details listen the purity of the line and now the emotional intensity. We reject them. And as an architect, I think that we should reject details. Or if I reformulate that, we should control techniques and details at the point that it will not become the center of our work. In a certain sense, we need a level of technicity that help us to put techniques on the side and to give to the form the possibility to be understood. In LAN, we work, I like that. I don't know if you know, it's Sugi model, it's a work where he starts to shoot buildings in a very blurred way. Those pictures are 2 meters by 2 meters 40 by 2. And even if you don't see the materials, even if you don't see the weather, even if you don't see the details, you totally understand the meaning and the form of this building. So for me, looking at architecture, looking at form, has to have this facility of approach where, in function of the look that you use, the distance that you have at a certain point, the form rises and the meaning rises by itself. In our case, we use the word abstraction to escape to the direct connection between the language and the function. I like this one, the sunset on the sea. And we start to work with skin and with a kind of pattern which are devoted to lose the scale, lose the understanding through the function of the form, and give to the form the meaning, the first meaning, which is the urbanity of and the role of this form in itself. So those are zoom of different buildings. It could be 5 floors, it could be 2 floors, it could be 1 floor. And we do this effort every time at a certain point to give to the envelope the role of be abstract and take the scale of the context as we read it. The repetition is also a good tool to do that. Until the moment where the skin in itself become a place to count history, which has probably a narrative function on the skin. These 2 projects show a bit this idea of losing the strong link between the expression of the function, the expression of the uses, the expression of the identity in terms of uses of the building, and give back something which is more cultural and can define and relate as a urban piece of this. Remember the white diagram that I showed you at the beginning. So the idea is that to make it white without making white. So this is a file house, for example, where in each floor we have 3 windows, and we have like different programs in the back. It's housing, office, gymnasium. And you cannot relate to that when you see this object in itself. That's the scale, for example. I don't know if you read it at the beginning of this slide. And this is the interior of 1 floor. And then the same diagram in the sport hall. Same things with this. This is an housing building where you don't know how many floors you have. You don't know if it's a windows or it's a sun screen. And everything is based on this idea of developing an abstract scheme that gives back this landmark that can define the waterfront it's in Nantes. And it's that, so each floor has two windows plus the sun space, and the sun is being open like that. So this is inside the loggia, an occupied loggia. And then you understand that the figure. The second word, so the idea is form and movement plus abstraction to express the thought. And then there's another word that really appears in one adventure that we had. Someone asked us to design a prison. And since the beginning, if you have to translate architecture, there are a million definitions nowadays, the art of that or the art, but it's the art of defining limits. When we design line, we decide which is the temperature outside, the temperature inside this line. Who is outside, who is inside? What is family, what is not? What is the others? What is nation? So our lines are limits, and the way we define this limit define also the political idea that we have of architecture. There is something that expressed very well this. It's this image. It's Matthias Unger's book, and it's crazy. There's just a line on the ground, and this space is the child space, and you are outside. And if you put your foot inside, you have to negotiate the entrance, and probably it will end up in a new space, which is in between. And that's architecture. Architecture is the moment where there is the level of sophistication of architecture is just a definition of a limit. A limit that could be expressed in a certain sense. It could be military, if you want, like here. It could be utopistic, like here. Prison. And so when we engage with this competition of the prison, a prison is an anti-urban object. If it's in the city, it's expressed by a wall, by a clear limit. If I go outside this wall, inside this wall, my rights change, the way I relate to the others change, and the life I live is totally different from outside. So if you see the history of the typology of the prison, whatever is the moment, it's an object which is or outside the city, in an island, in a remote place, or if it's in the city, it's characterized by a wall. So another time we were young, we decided to engage with this competition, and we decided our only thought was to erase this wall, to make the prison as an urban object, as an object that has to relate to the context, and has to give a limit which is not anymore black and white, but is characterized by I don't know if you have the word in Spanish, but a limitrofo, a zone, a buffer zone, which is not the line, but it becomes a surface. So we decided to use all the parts of the project or in the program that could be exposed on the streets in a certain condition. And we recreate an inhabited world that characterizes the inside form. That's the prison at the end, which is a hall that connects the exterior and the interior. Outside is the office, characterized by this scheme. Then you enter to this space here. It's an object that doesn't have scale. It could be an office building, it could be a museum, it could be whatever it is. Even the facade is not very defined in function of the light. If it's open or closed, you see something which is black. It's a curtain. So you enter to this door that you cannot really see, but is there on the right. And and you enter that space, which is a transition between the exterior and the interior, but still it's a windows on the city. So when you enter the first moment, you enter the prison, you turn your head and you see the district in the back. And then this is the public space of the prison, it's the courtyard, where we engage with an ironic interpretation of a childhood space, full of color. It was a bit of provocation, but the idea was to break the code of this gray space. So as you can see here, the entire idea was to redefine a limit, to erase a clear line. And then we used that to design a theater. It's a very nice story that starts before us in 1960. The theater is called Théâtre du Maillon. And it was part of a political program called Maison de la Culture, House of Culture, with the idea that if you put a theater in a complex context, in a social complex context, you can engage probably with the inhabitants to create something in common. So they start to build the Maison de la Culture in what we call les cités, let's say those modern blocks that I showed at the beginning with the bag. And Théâtre du Maillon was one of that. It was the first step of this company was to engage relation with this district, which is in Strasbourg, Quartier d'Haute-Pierre. And they were enough successful, and the city decided to give them this building, which was made to guest fairs. And a very nice story begins between the company of the theater and the building. The building is everything you need, everything you don't do if you want to do a theater. It was a building that doesn't have acoustics. It was totally open on the tracks in the back, in the logistic part of the building. Everything was temporary. Every year they have to dismantle and rebuild their own stage and seats. And so that arrives in a moment where the theater in itself was changing. What we call contemporary theater is something where the limit between public and actor, public and scene has become more liquid. It's not anymore I watch, but I can participate to something. And so they become one of the most important scenes in Europe that start to guest people like Castellucci, like do contemporary theater, and be part of the cultural revolution around the representation in the theater. So it's an history that has started all around Europe through the transformation of buildings that were not theaters. So in some way, architecture was part of a cultural change because the typology was changed. So they use the exterior, they use even the bar to do representation, they use obviously the exterior of the city, they start to put a box in the city to continue each events continued outside the wall of the theater in itself. And they were part of this large movement, which are the most important contemporary scenes in Europe. So when they called us, all this in Italy, in Belgium, in England, in Germany, whatever it is, the theater is every time is related to a building which was not a theater. So then the Nike arrives and he bought the building he made a deal with the city of Strasbourg, asking for the fair site, and the city decided to build a new theater for the Le Maillon. But we have, in that precise moment, it was we had no experience with theater. We were very lucky to be selected to the selection of the teams that has to compete, but we were just listening and try to understand what we were doing. So at the first brief, they gave us that image, which was we don't want to move. We love where we are, and we don't want a new theater. And the brief on the first line of the brief was, we don't want a theater. Except that when someone that do a theater say we don't want a theater, probably doesn't mean the same things that you can understand if you are not into this culture. So we start to do research, as we do every time, trying to understand what means we don't want a theater. And when you see the history of a theater, it's very clear that it's a building since not long time, before it was a landscape, was part of the city. They used the slope, the natural geography to create a place for representation. And then at certain points, we end up doing a theater as an interior space. And we end up with one figure, which is the universal theater in Europe. It's called Italian theater, or proscenium theater, because there is a precise line. Whatever is the theater, you will find the same plan. An entrance open to the city, the room, or two rooms, depending on the theater, and the logistics, and the artistic part. And between this board, nothing happens. So when we say, then they say, we don't want a theater, they say, we don't want a proscenium theater. This precise line is the limit between the creation of the illusion on the right, artists, technicians, people from the office, the representation, scene, and the public. So the idea for us was to follow this and use another way to enter the idea of building a theater and create an open system that could be updated in function of their wishes. So as an architect, we relate to the only form that we know that can describe something which is shared, but can also evolve. So we start to design a city inside a limit. So like the foundation of a city, we designed before the exterior line. So we did one facade, which has no difference between whatever is the orientation. It's based on one simple rule, which is the largest glass that you can produce in Europe without doing specifically a jumbo glass, and the large sliding doors that you can have on the market. And then the structure and the mold of this structure to loose materials. That defines the entire envelope, which means that there is no one entrance, there are 27 entrances, in function of where you want to enter the building. So starting from there, that was a construction site in itself. We had two construction sites, was the facade and the interior, in the same moment, like two different projects. Hello. So it's a casted concrete, 18 meters, one only, I don't know how you say it. It's very technical, but. And then inside, we had the limit, two streets, with the interior street, Decumano, giving on the cathedral of the city. It's a bit a cliche, but I like that. In this moment, it was a bit like the Romans, when we founded the city. And then the rooms, which have few technical parts which are fixed, and then everything could change. Designing even the exterior, the courtyard, the entrance, the logistic part, as with the same potential of being a place for representation. And even where the tracks are is an amphitheater. And so we end up with that, showing with the same shapes, because the problem of flexibility is that you don't have to imagine to be flexible and then every time redo everything. So the idea is that even with the same chair that they are unfoldable, that we found in Holland, we could just move and create 20 different configurations. Frontal, bifrontal, four side, then moving the room in one place. And then we showed that at the beginning, we won the competition, and we end up with that. And we designed the wall of 14 meters high with the characteristic of the acoustic wall that you need for the theater that can fold and change the shape of the room. So it's like a factory. There is an exterior envelope, very simple. I mean, very simple, very I love it because you don't have the scale here. Even if it's 20 meters high, it could be, if you don't have the small lady in the bikes, you could feel like it was a small house. The noise very big. And then you have those space. This is the courtyard, which is closed but open to the sky, like a Roman impluvium, and with these bins that can carry exactly the same machine than a room inside. It's a space which is very strange because you don't know if it's outside or inside, but you can use as a patio to entrance. You can use. You will see there are a few pictures of the different uses. So the walls are there. This is a chair. This is a 20-meter high wall in steel with the acoustic. Even the signage, it's a LED screen, so everything can change in function of how you're using the space. So if it's a bar, it's a bar. If it's a restaurant, it's a restaurant. If it's a room, it's a room. You just have to write that. This is one room with the chairs, the folded chairs, a cinema space, and then the street. From the courtyard to the interior. Even the rehearsal room has been figured to be a lecture room. This is the artist canteen. The toilet without any genre, so woman and man, and no separation. And we were lucky enough to design also the furniture. We decided obviously to not design. So we gave to them a file and a project which was called make a chair, make a bench, etc., etc. So they had just to digital cut their own chairs and then assemble it. So we give them instruction to do it, and they start to do chairs and then tables. The idea was that if they need, they can have one chair, two chairs, etc., etc. We gave to them the materials to do it, and it becomes that. This is one of the first configuration, a moment where it was a restaurant, and then it was a party. The entrance was moved here, a room. The track part in the back, which gets the show. Even the corridor became a space for exhibition. The stairs to go in the room became a space to another art performance. This is the largest smoking room in Europe, but it's also a place to residence for artists. And during the COVID was the place where the theater continued to work. So this is very nice because it's a project where you find the idea of the forming movement, the definition of the limit, the potential that the limit gives to the interior. And we start to continue this research of space which are typological, which they may jump from one typology to another, following the history of one typology and proposing a change in another one. And this is one which is ongoing now. It's an office building. Everything is black. It's office. And then the system become a huge greenhouses where you don't have. This is the back of the building. The idea that you don't have the office facade on the street, but each space is in a garden, and each garden is in a specific ecosystem. And so you can work in the garden. The garden can be open and closed in function of the weather and the season. It's also a climatic approach because each of these gardens preheat the air or create a condition for more ventilation. So the facade is very simple and industrialized because we don't have this relation with the street or whatever. The image in the street is an abstract building just composed like a greenhouses. And all this part is sliding panels that open on the garden. And it's less or more the same things that we are proposing to the extension of the Maxi. You know the Maxi in Rome made it by David. which is a very complex building. You can like it or not, it has a very strong urban approach. The district is Flaminio, there the auditorium of Renzo Piano, Palazzetto dello Sport Nervi, and then all the Olympic part of Rome. And Maxi is there, and the site was that part of the museum site. It's a very heterogeneous district made by housing, the sport, leisure, culture, and then there is that part which is the ancient military part of the city made by barracks. So a few of these images, the residential, the sport, and the typology. This was an open competition. Those are the landmarks that generate all the movement around this district. Some of them are very impressive. And it's a new quarter in Rome. Here we are in the end of the 19th century. There is nothing. Then they start to build the district, and then they start to connect the district to this diagonal to the Foro Olimpico. And this is the project of Zardi. It's the idea to reinforce this connection to the fluidity and the form of the building. It's a very simple but very efficient sketch of the beginning of this project, where she just put in tension the street with the other part of Rome, and that generates the formal expression of the entire project. In our case, it was very complex to relate to that because it's a special monumental piece of the city. So we decided less or more to do the opposite and try to generate a generic piece that can complete the diagram to highlight even more the building of Zadit and the connection to the public space. Using the church as a piece into the what we can build an history. So that's the site, the first of, and then the site is also a bit lower compared to the rest of the Rome, but we discovered that if you go higher to 20 meters, you can see the seven mountains, you can see the entire city. So it's quite impressive. And so the project, the master plan became extremely simple. It's just another piece, perpendicular, in line with the church that closed the housing system on the right, and generate finally a block, which now is an open block. And then it's open to this new public space that we designed today with BusMed. And to end up with this figure, which is it's a nice program. So it's an archive of art where the collection can also be shown to the public. So it's a bit what's happened in the, I don't know if you know the Boymans in Rotterdam or what the Met are doing, the idea that you open your collection without a curator. And so you as a public, you can see how you store, and when you store, the logic of the piece and the places are very different. So you can find an art piece from the 14th century close to a contemporary one just because they need both 15 degrees to be conserved. So this idea of discovered through other factors is very new and it's very interesting. So everything works around that. And then we add, we start to demineralize the entire system to create a forest and then use this space to go up on the roof. So it's very simple. The project is a park, and at the end of the park, a piece that completes the block with the church and the rest. That's the image, and in this block, obviously, you can go up and use this garden, which is a figure that we found everywhere. The hanging garden starts in Babylon, but in Italy, it's nice another time because we are in the limit of a few typology. The hanging garden, the belvedere, the planted belvedere that you can find, for example, this one is in Lucca. It's amazing, by the way. And the enclosed garden, Giardino Conclusus. And then we want to add a level of domesticity using furniture that can help people to just use this garden as they want. And so that's the project today. It's ongoing. I mean, it's not. It's already changed. That's an image of the roof. What is crazy is that you really have the view of the entire city, and you also see the max in a very different way. The connection with the housing and the church in the back, and the square. Okay, then I switch totally because this is a new world that's open for us now. That we in Europe, the city less or more are in this moment where there are not any more ground. You don't build anymore, and you start to transform the city in itself. And so we really start to engage a lot of projects where the transformation it's the main point. So the way we think until now, which was from the city to the docks, from the large concept to every choice, is totally in a new place where you just confront yourself with a legacy, using the occasion that you find. It's a bit like going in a flea market and find pieces and then decide to give sense to those pieces in an entire project, and then verify that this one is coherent with the urban scale. So as an architect, we don't have anymore this possibility of thinking in a very linear scale when you start to engage with transformation and legacy. So we should train our brain to work very differently, but believe me, it's very, very interesting. So I want to show you the last and the biggest project we are doing now, which is a tower. It's close to Gare de Lyon. It's this tower, which was made in the 70s, transformed in the 90s, and today has to be updated in a certain sense because it didn't work anymore. It's too hot or too cold, and the space is not flexible for an office building. It's not anymore, doesn't correspond to neither the image of the city or the way we work today. So that's the original building. It's a project of Dubussé, which was very nice, based on this idea of create a base, connecting the two, and then work with these two levels, the one of the city and then the top. And then in the 90s, they start to split the building. This has been transformed by Data. It's a very good office in Paris. And this is the other one. It's from an old guy. I forget the name. But as you can see, it's a mirror building. I mean, he has lost everything from the first identity, which was those vertical lines, the relationship with the base, etc., to be transformed in this the image of the office building in the 90s, from between 90 and 2000. And so that was a competition. The building is there, and it's part of a large project that has to connect the train station here with Gare de Lyon, using the bridge Charles de Gaulle as a new urban part that has to open this very closed system between the two train stations. So the point was that there was a building that was formed. As you can see, there was a base, then the base changed, the facade changed, and then we start to question ourselves which can drive our decision today, what we can add as a layer here, and which are the reasons that we have to add some layer or not. So, as I say, and also how we can participate to this huge project that is ongoing now in Paris that try to use each piece of the city, even private, to connect the two routes, Bois de Boulogne and Bois de Vincennes, through an ecological corridor. So that's really the idea, and it's ongoing. Whatever you do in Paris, you have to have 50% of green in your space in a new project. And even obviously how we can use the space to lower the urban temperature. We call that îlot de chaleur, hot island, and how you can go against that. And so the story was very simple. That's the building. That's the orientation of the building. So it's very horrible in terms of performance when you work. The facade is full south, which means that you need sun protection every day. So even if it's a building that look the most incredible panorama in Paris, because Notre Dame is here, Ile de la Cité, the entire city, in reality they cannot use the view as a plus, because you need to protect yourself from the sun. And obviously you need a lot of energy then to go against this natural heating. That was one condition. As you can see, the facade is horribly hot, especially the most important one, which is the one on the river. And that's the view. That's the view from the building, which is literally even a commercial aspect of that space. So we decide to do one small movement. As I say, it's not anymore from the city. You set your important step that you can help to confront yourself with the existing form. And then sometimes you start from an opportunity. So the idea was here, how do we can make a facade, a passive facade, how we can change the orientation of the facade. It was simple. So we start to do that with an opaque part here and a glass here. So the sun goes there and doesn't enter the building, and you can keep the view. And in the same time, we can ventilate here, and then that's the idea, and then everything can be prefabricated and put it on top of the existing facade. So it's a very climatic approach, but that gives back one figure which is very domestic, and I like it. It's the bow windows. The bow windows is this space where from your living room you go, you enter, and you inhabit the city. It's an invitation to go with your table almost outside. So we decided to use the bow windows, and it was enough intelligent as a move. So that's the facade. And it can also kind of give a domestic experience to the office space. These are the different interiors. As you can see, we go from a very red facade to a blue one without any sunscreen. Let's cut the electric consumption by 4. And in the entire years, we need to use sunscreen only, I think, 2 hours in 2 months. And that became the leitmotif that generate the entire renovation of the building. And that give us also the opportunity, because the bow windows add surfaces. In Paris, if you renovate a building, you should end up with the same surface that you had at the beginning, whatever you do. So the fact that through the windows, we gain a very interesting and novel surface, allow us to destroy the basement and open up for a garden that become also an asset for the entire building, and then use the additional surface to generate a very low pavilion that helps the public life here. So that's the 3D of the building. On the other side, on the street, the original one, and then the small one, and the garden. The garden is designed by Michel Levy, with this idea of, and obviously there's a parking inside, so it's a landscape, it's a geography that can guess trees, even if it's on concrete. Just did the same one in front, with chipperfield, with the same techniques. And for us, it was very important that the garden has to come close to the windows and even enter the interior. So that's the image of the ground floor. And I'm doing that. This is a small pavilion which has this green facade of Patrick Blanc, which is quite picturesque, but believe me, it's an experience. It's very nice. That's the interior of the place, which was inexistent before. The facade on the street of the small pavilion. and then different space. And the idea was to continue the garden inside. So we decided to use the parking to put 2 meters of concrete and put trees inside the building, and use all the wall as a mirror to create this kind of illusion with the exterior garden. And that's true. Yeah, we mentioned TC. I promised that I will advertise monography, so it's in Spanish. You can buy it. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Umberto, for the wonderful presentation. And we have some time for questions in the audience. I have the first one that intrigued me in the conversation we had earlier with students about the books. That is about the origin of the office with your partner. A little bit about because you mentioned you started very young, winning that competition at 28 years old. And I wanted to know the cultural background you and your partner had of your work methodology or your experience, like a little bit, where did it came from? School, the practice, or just going solo, very, very young and seeing what will happen.
Now, we have worked, the reason I'm in France is because at the beginning, I really wanted to escape the military service. That was obligatory at the time. And there was a law in Italy saying that if you work outside Italy, you can, for 3 years, you don't do, you could be exonerated of this. So I started working in an architectural office on 2nd years of architecture. So I worked for everyone. And at the beginning, I did renders and then competition. And I was literally like a prostitute. I was like really open. And Benoit, I met Benoit during this part because he has less or more the same. So when we arrived at the diploma, we had a lot of experience in competition and in different practice. And then we were really conscious that we would, since the beginning, we engaged with the idea of build very quick, but in the same time try to keep a foot in I can never talk called theory, but in the idea that we have to engage with some other experience which are more related to writing or exhibition or whatever. So if you see our diploma, which probably is the milestone of LAN, we did the diploma together. We decided to write a book. There was a competition in Austria which was called Future Vision Housing, and we wrote a novel as a render for the competition. And it was the story of a man and a woman into this house, describing the house without drawings, but through what's happened in this story. And we won the competition, and we sent the book to Paul Virilio, and he said, "Can you please come?" And we start to do the diploma with him and other people. And we decided, and the project was very simple. It was the beginning of internet, etc. And the idea was that probably what could change in the housing in the future is not the space in itself, but the access of that. So it was a story of, which is less or more Airbnb now. It was a story of a club where you pay a fees and you can live in different places in the world, and those places can be economically interesting because they use the facade as a space for advertising. And then there's a level of furniture that you kept in, like I want that. And so that was the beginning of the story, and then we built up as a diploma. We rented the space outside the school. We decided to do the diploma outside the school, and we rented another space where we built an exhibition, and the exhibition was the diploma. And so physically, we built it. We built the scenography, the space, so we were like a carpenter every day. And in the same time, we did the content inside. The exhibition was, so the jury has to enter that space, and it was the office of the company that allowed this, and you have to open the desk and find traces of, to understand. So it was kind of a very huge experience, and to get the money to do that, we sent letters using the jury and saying that we were already architects, that we need sponsors, do an exhibition with those guys. They didn't know that we did it. And then at a certain point, we sent a letter to, it was a TV show at the time, which was called Culture Cube, very cool. It was about advertising and television. And we say we have invented the system to project on the facade and an economy and an exhibition. So the TV came and they interviewed us in a very fake way. It was brought Umberto Napolitano, architect. I was even not architect. And these entire things push us to say, and then we get the maximum note in school, even before we were kind of wild. And then from there, we decided to open the office and stay with 2 foot, which was one the construction and then the rest. So the background, I don't know if it's bad. The ambition has been clear since the beginning. That we had to think outside the way we discovered practice into the experience we had before. It was a bit boring. So, but we were very young. So when you are young, you are very resilient. You don't need money. I mean, we didn't pay for us ourselves for minimum 2-3 years. I thanks my mother and my father. But you know, so you have the luxury of, you know, be resilient.
That's a good story. Una pregunta.
Thank you, Umberto, for the lecture. I really like the name of it, like limit of form and form of limit. And the development of the lecture, I was paying attention to the images, and an idea came to me that in relation to the limit, also the form of the limit. Because I realized that we managed somehow to design and to build the limit almost of your building. I don't want to say all because maybe I'm wrong, but whatever you do, housing, theater, prison, or an art warehouse, all the form of that limit is a grid of windows. And that grid of windows, it's very complex and it changes all the time. But what I wanted to ask you is how did you manage, or what you have to say, maybe, on that input to resolve every different scales, different programs, with almost the same strategic approach.
No, I think the grid is it's present in the housing. But there is a nice text from Andrea Zanderigo from Bauku that opened our monography, and he's a friend, and we know each other with Bauku since the school, and he wrote about us this idea that at the beginning, we were searching ourselves to screen. If you see our first building, the first 6-7 years, I think there was no green. Then at a certain point, we had confronted with the production of a very low budget project. The green came under the grid. I mean, the use of the structure, facade, and windows as an instrument to define certain space and certain building came especially for economical reason at the beginning, and after the Saussure, the Osmanian building experience, we understand also the interest in terms of typological tools to evolve inside the plan. So it has been very related to a pragmatic approach, but you cannot say that the prison has windows or the greenhouses is based on that. There are a lot of probably it's the idea of scheme more than windows, but abstraction is on base of everything. So when we use the grid, it's less or more to combine this idea of forget the connection between the function and the expression of the function. So generalize the same pattern. It's more like a pattern than, but this pattern is the 80% of times related to economic reason in the way we build certain projects and to the facility of using that. But yes, it's a question.
Otra pregunta. Está muy callada. No, I'm a little bit taking Marcelo's question and your answer. I'm still wondering why this effort on abstraction comes. There was a moment in the lecture where you clearly stated that things should be as abstract as possible, that things shouldn't have visible details, textures, and so on. And in the two books you've done, all the buildings are full of textures and layerings, even the Osmanian with the different partition, and in Napoli, the buildings are very articulated, and we talked yesterday. You mentioned that was a layer of architecture, of negotiation. And so I don't know if you see an ambiguity there.
No, I probably expressed myself in a not correct way, but the idea is that for me what is interesting is that at the end the object has to be devoted totally to the city or to certain context. And to do that, sometimes to read too much information, we lose the impact that the same object can have in a certain context. But don't take what I say as a dogmatic approach. It's because I still consider myself and the studio in a place where we engage with doubt, with contradiction, with research. I mean, we are totally. First of all, you should understand that our project comes from a conflict between me and Benoit. This conflict is clear from the beginning. I design, let's say, I raise the question. I'm really not interested in the program. Zero. When I start the project, I start every time from the input that I get from the exterior and from the question that we have raised. It has nothing to do with the possibility that this project gives to the city, to a certain scenario that comes. Benoit, he starts from the interior. He starts from the function, he starts from the perfect spot where the building becomes most intelligent. So each building is a clash at a certain moment between two buildings. And this clash, in function of the situation, we go in one direction or in another. But I like that. I like this idea that is a battle between two ways, because architecture is all that, from inside to outside, from outside to inside, and sometimes from inside to inside. And so we are the layer on that, which is the consciousness today that we have to find a new language. That's something that really I'm struggling with. I'm sure that we have to get away from the modern heritage, and we have to find a common ground which is expressed by a vocabulary, by a language that can be shared and can be the translation of the ambition that the society drives now, which is related almost the majority with the ecological question. So the problem that I found in general now is that we don't have a language, Renaissance, Baroque, there were philosophical, social, cultural revolution. Renaissance was the humanist. Then it became a style, it became a language, and through this language, the revolution came. Or the evolution, the revolution, and the transformation, whatever it was, the common project was based on the fact that at certain points we were able to transform a cultural and societal issue in a language and in a vocabulary. The problem we have now as a generation is that we all want to change the approach of architecture. We should ask ourselves why we build. We know that buildings are 30% of the cause of the destruction of the planet. So when we continue to build, we should ask ourselves why we do that and what we are. And we know that there is something there that has to be changed. Energy, the footprint of the building, climatic approach, using the building as a tool to also face this climatic change. But this, for the moment, has not been translated in a language, but it has been enforced in the heritage that we have of the modern vocabulary that we still use today. Each of us is still modern, even if it's postmodern. But the word modern is still there. And I think that as a LAN, as a studio, we are really engaged now. We are consciousness of that, and we are really struggling with the idea, in the last project we are doing, of engaging with experience that bring us outside our comfort zone in terms of vocabulary and language. I don't know if I'm clear.
It was a good answer. But I think that the Scaloneta starts playing in 5 minutes. So thank you very much, Umberto, and we can see you afterwards. Muchas gracias a todos por venir.